Thank you, Jessica and Sean and Ryan and Biani. Thank you so much for being a part of this Adapting to the Future of Work convening today. I have the pleasure of introducing the final speaker of the day, who will be sharing a really important presentation for our community. This data presentation will provide very timely estimates of young adults who are out of school and out of work in New York City and who these young adults are, and a look at national trends in young adult employment and education, along with recommendations for policymakers to advance young people along educational and career pathways. Will be shared by a leading economist in the field, Dr. Christine Chmura. A brief on this information is forthcoming from Jobs First NYC, and it will cover the data that you see today. Christine Chmura, PhD, is the CEO and Chief Economist for Chmura Economics Analytics, a quantitative research and economic development and workforce consulting firm. She is a quoted source on regional and national trends in the media throughout the nation. In the public sector, Dr. Chmura has served on the Virginia Governor's Advisory Board of Economists under the last 8 administrations. Chmura is an important partner of Jobs First NYC, and we are thrilled to have their CEO here today. Christine, I turn the stage over to you.
Thank you, Carrie. And can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Let me get this slide deck up. Great. All right. Thanks again, Carrie. And thank you all for having me here today. Looking through the data, it's just amazing what a horrible impact this virus has had on the country and clearly on the youth of the world, and especially in New York City, you'll see that it's taken its toll. But what I'm going to do here first is start with looking at the national data. And you'll see that the US is in recovery, but the COVID infections are elevated due to the Delta variant. I'll show you some data on that. Progress toward herd immunity has slowed. Then we'll look at some data on the labor markets. They're tight and getting tighter, which is good news for young adults who are looking for jobs. And we'll see that in the unemployment rate that's come down. And then we'll talk a little bit about working from home. Is that a passing trend? And then finally, I'll end with information on New York City trends, the population of the 18 to 24-year-olds, for example, and out of school, out of work youth we'll be looking at. So beginning then first with the US. So infections, here you're seeing in blue the total number of infections in the US, new cases, and in orange is the 7-day moving average. So when the pandemic started, we saw the greatest numbers of infections after the Thanksgiving and Christmas holiday seasons. And then we saw them come down, increase a bit after spring break. And now we're seeing them pick back up again because of the Delta variant. And it hasn't been this high since back around last summer. But in terms of how much further will it go up, a lot of the people in the medical arena have said that we should see it peaking in 3 to 4 weeks. And so historically, we economists have our forecasts and we base them on assumptions such as interest rates. What is the Federal Reserve going to do in terms of raising rates? How high is oil going? But in these days, we're relying on medical people to tell us what the infection rates are going to look like. And so we use the University of Washington, and they have this broken down by state. So actually, if we were looking at this forecast 3 weeks ago, this purple most likely line would have been down in this area. But now with the Delta variant, you see it's gone up again, not as high as we saw last December, but clearly to more elevated levels. Some of the background that we look at, we have a herd immunity model, which helps determine our economic models in terms of GDP and employment. And what we're seeing is that the vaccinations are slowing. As of July 26th, 49% were fully vaccinated. President Biden wanted us to see 70% by July 4th, and we have missed that date. We're administering 591,000 doses per day on average over the past week. To give you a sense of that, it was 1 million at the beginning of this year. It peaked at about 4 million doses a week on average in a day in a week about 3 months ago, and now we're down to 591,000. Early studies are showing that the vaccines that are out there are effective against the Delta variant, but we're watching this closely because, again, this impacts how fast this economy will grow going forward. You can read more about the details on our model here at this blog. But so we have 3 forecasts. When will we get back to herd immunity? And that's when we would expect this economy really to open up, although it has been doing very well. And GDP came out today, strong numbers above 6% annualized for the second quarter. So consumers are spending, but we wouldn't expect to get back to more normal times until we get to herd immunity, which again, doctors were saying that should be about 80%. With Delta, some are saying to get to herd immunity, we need to be at 85 to 90%. But looking at the optimistic scenario that we have, you see us getting to about 80% over the next month or two. The most likely we have getting to 80% at the end of the year, and the pessimistic, this could be if the Delta variant continues to attack the US and other places around the world, not until the middle of next year. So overall, COVID is still having a huge impact on the economy, and we see it in the numbers that you'll see later about New York City. Now, looking at data, again, as a catalyst for change, the labor market is tight, and you'll see that in the next few slides, which creates all kinds of opportunities for young adults. So here on this first slide, we're looking at job postings. So we have a software called JobsEQ, and within it, we show job postings, and we look at the median duration of those. So how long are they staying online before they're filled? And the longer they stay online before they're filled, the tighter the labor market. So here you see, as we went into COVID, to the pandemic, typically the median duration is somewhere around 25, but it started to go up, the median duration around Christmas time. If there's some seasonality, it goes up, then it fell off a bit. Again, that's some seasonality coming off the holidays. But then when we went into the lockdown and businesses closed, they pulled a lot of their ads off the, they no longer needed the individuals, so they pulled the ads, and so the the median time to fill an ad dropped considerably. And now we're back up to the end of 21, where we're seeing an increase here because of seasonality, and then again decreasing after the holiday due to seasonality. But then the latest data showing an increase again in the time to fill ads, which points towards this is a tight labor market. When we look at the unemployment rate, it jumped tremendously about to 15%, and now it's down back below 6%. Something else I want to point out here, see this gray shaded area and this gray shaded area, very small. This is the current recession. So the National Bureau of Economic Research, NBER, is the group within the United States that identifies the beginning and end of a recession. Most places around the globe, it's just defined as two consecutive drops in GDP. But here in the US, the NBER looks at a lot of monthly data and determines when did the recession begin and when did it end. So they have already declared that the recession began last year. It started in March and went through April and then ended in May. That straddles 2 quarters. So then in terms of quarters, the recession was from the first quarter of last year to the second quarter, and then it ended. So a very, very short recession, but a recession that had a huge impact on many people in the US and around the world. So one other thing here is that we can look at the unemployment rate by age group. So here we're looking at youth. Those between the ages of 16 and 24, their unemployment rate is shown in red. Blue is the average unemployment rate for all ages, and the gray bars are, again, all the recessions that we've seen. So over time, typically the youth unemployment rate is 6 percentage points higher than the average. And you can see it spiked, sorry about that, it spiked, and then it came back down. But right now, the gap is only 3.4 percentage points. So right now, more youth are able to find jobs than have been in the past. And what's the reason for that? Well, the participation rate is fairly low, and it dropped tremendously. The chart on the right here, you can see how it dropped tremendously during the recession. These data go back to the 1950s, gray shaded areas, again, recessions. And why is it so low right now? The reasons, some of the reasons are at the bottom of this chart here. Some people have taken early retirement. Some people are not coming back to the labor market yet because of fear of contracting the virus. Some people need to stay at home because their kids are out of school and they're learning online, not in school. And we've got this generous federal unemployment insurance, $300 extra that go through Labor Day. So those last two things, once kids go back to school, and once the that extra unemployment rate falls off in September, we should see the participation rate going up. So in the meantime, kids, young kids who are looking for jobs should have a much easier time finding them now because of people retiring or people not going back into the labor force. So this is a great market for kids to be finding, young people to be finding jobs. So one other thing that's going on is that the quit rate is high. So these data come up from the BLS, and they started collecting them about 20 years ago. So you can see here we only have 2 recessions in this database. But in April, 4 million people quit their jobs to find new jobs. And that's 2.7% of all people. That quit rate still was high at 2.5% in May. But as you can see here, when we go through a recession, people don't quit their jobs. Same happened here. Same happened during COVID. They don't quit their jobs because they're afraid they won't find another job. The labor market is not all that good. Not all people are, not all businesses are hiring. But here you see that in the past couple of months, with the economy getting better, people have started quitting to find new work or because they found new work. So this is almost like a double whammy to businesses where we're just getting to this point in the economy where it's starting to open back up. So they're having to fill those positions. The restaurants have more people, so we need more waiters, we need more chefs and other positions like that. And then at the same time, they've got people leaving because they think the grass is greener on the other side to go to different companies to work. So clearly, again, a tight labor market, but one that should be a good environment for youth to find jobs. And this quit rate varies by industry. So now you're seeing the major industries and how many people are quitting within those industries. The highest quit rate is in leisure and hospitality at 5.3%. But in terms of the number of people leaving in May, you can see trade and transportation, 859,000 leaving there. Leisure hospitality, 764,000. And on down the list, manufacturing, nearly 300,000. Construction, I know one that you have some services around 160,000, and then financial services much smaller at 126,000. And so now another question that comes up is how much of this work from home is going to stick after the pandemic is over? Whenever we have a recession, trends usually accelerate. So the BLS added a question to its household survey asking people if they teleworked in the past 4 weeks due to the pandemic. And these numbers are kind of surprising because you would think they would be higher based on what we hear in the media with some of the larger IT companies. So 26% back in July of 2020 said they had to work from home because of the pandemic. And that started to go down until we got to November, December of last year, when the number of viruses was rising, more people then working from home. But now the latest data, only 14.4% said they had to work from home because of the pandemic. So one thing because of that is that the labor shed is defined differently now. And the labor shed is the area from which you can pull your workers. And typically when we work with firms that are expanding or considering locating in a different area, they like to look at the labor shed within a 30-minute drive time, because if it's much longer than that, the workers might not stay with them for very long. So now firms from all over the country can employ the youth in New York City because they can work from home in New York City. So from that perspective, a question that some of you may want to consider is, should some of you be working with firms outside of New York City to provide them with skilled labor that you have, because they can work within New York City for a company that, say, is in Silicon Valley. So in trying to get sort of an idea of, well, what occupations are in demand from that perspective, we looked at our job postings again, and we looked at within the job ad, are they saying that you can work from home? It's remote work. And so the top occupations that said they could be remote workers are listed here. And in fact, we wanted to show you in 2019, the number of ads that said you can work remote as this occupation, and how much that increased now in the second quarter of 2021. 566% increase for software developers, 400% increase in customer service reps who could work from home. And on down the line, you're looking at sales representatives, management analysts, these huge increases in terms of them being able to work from home, financial services, marketing, network and computer systems administrators. But the thing is, you need technology to be able to participate. You need to have good internet, and you need to have good equipment at home to be in these jobs and to be working from home. And there's such a big increase here. But then the other thing that is interesting, similar to, I think, the BLS results, is that it's still a pretty small proportion of the population that can be working from home. So as a percent of all the ads online right now, 27% of software developers can work from home. Going down the line, 23% of customer service reps, management analysts only 17%, computer support only 15%. The big one is insurance agents at nearly 50%. Security analysts and these others below 20%, 25% of computer systems engineers. So again, it looks like more people, the shift toward working from home, more people will be working from home, but it seems that it really is too soon to know when it will, how much will stick. So there was a great article in the Wall Street Journal in June, and I want to mention a couple of the research items that they reported in it. And the first was that communication is often sacrificed, and the deficit is not always perceived. So there was one study that showed that when people came to the office at least one day a week, communication increased by 20%. Another study looked at a large Asian IT firm during the pandemic, and this study found that hours increased by 30%, the hours that they worked increased by 30%, but productivity fell by 20%. And then there's concerns that a hybrid structure could affect company diversity. So what this researcher found was that college graduates with children, almost 50% of women want to work from home full time. And then looking back to a 2014 study showed that there's a 50% lower rate of promotion after 21 months for those who stay at home compared to those who work in the office. So again, that could have an impact on diversity within companies. And then one final study they referenced was a survey by Prudential, which individuals are more likely to find new jobs as this pandemic is winding down. 34% of millennials, 24% of Generation X, and only 10% of baby boomers they expected to look for a new job, to quit their current job and look for a new one after the pandemic. So overall, for the U.S. economy, clearly it's improving. Unfortunately, we're seeing this small period of time where we have this Delta variant that's going to slow us down. But the labor market is very tight. which should be very good news for youth who are currently trying to find jobs. Now switching gears and looking at New York City, here a lot of the data is from the current population survey, April 2021, gives us somewhat of a glimpse at what's going on during the COVID period. And this slide here is showing you population decline over time in New York City. So in 2017, down 9%, during the COVID period, down 4.4%. So at least the good news here is that COVID did not accelerate the decline in 18 to 24-year-olds. On this next slide, typical young adults out of school, out of work pattern follow the same trend. It goes up in the summer when students are out of school and down in the winter when businesses hire seasonal workers. And again, so this is what we typically see, up in the summer, down in the winter when businesses are hiring. We're showing it by year, and the average is the dotted line, 2016 to 2019. No surprise, when we look at 2020, we see this huge spike in out of school, out of work youth due to COVID. So a big jump up to 41%. And look at the number of people that are involved here. We're looking at 230,000 or so more than we saw back in January, February. So a very disconcerting trend there. When we look at the numbers by year, just the percentages, again, we have a huge jump due to COVID, and that would be the average for 2020. Now here we're looking at the number and percent of out of school, out of work by year from 2016 through 2020. And these are the percentages that you saw on the previous charts, but we're giving you the numbers here so that you can see how many people are involved. And from 2019 to 2018, you can see a huge jump, almost 80,000 more individuals out of school, out of work. And you can also see the tremendous progress that you had made previously between 2016 and 2019 was all lost and more due to the pandemic. Here we're looking at the number of just out of school, as opposed to out of school and out of work, just out of school. And the dotted line shows you the average of the 2016 through 2019, so the more normal times, and now the COVID 2020 year in green. And you can see that when the lockdown started, we started to see the number out of school starting to rise. So if someone was still in school via the computer, you're not counted here. So these are individuals who were uninterested in being in school on the internet or unable to be in school on the internet. That rose all the way to 72%. And then you can see here where the numbers would start to go down because kids going back to school. We didn't see that trend. So here's another bad sign that during COVID, even when schools were opening back up, kids were not going back to school. Now we're looking at the percent out of school for the 18 to 24-year-olds. And again, green is during 2020. The black dotted line is the more normal times. And you see that jump up again, similar to the previous chart. And then here over the last couple of months, getting back down to more normal levels of what we've seen in the past. Now we're looking at the percent out of school for just the ages 18 to 19. In August, you really see the stark impact of COVID having on kids not starting college or going back to school. Again, 76% compared to a number that percentage that was like around 40 in pre-COVID times. In terms of race, ethnicity, how it impacted young adults, on the right-hand side, we have total young adults and out of school, out of work young adults on the left-hand side. And so notice that the Latinx were overrepresented in the out of school, out of youth. 30% of all young adults, but 39% of those out of school, out of youth, out of school, out of work. And then white were underrepresented. So 28% of total population, but only 21% of those that were out of school, out of work, young adults. In terms, well, sorry about that. In terms of gender, in blue, we've got female, in green, male. Here's 2019 and 2020. So men went from 16% to out of school, out of work, up to 23%, but the percentage points for women, females, rose more from 18% to 29% during the COVID period. And again, take a look at the number of individuals that are being impacted here. 40,000 some females and about 20,000 or so males. The number and percent of out of school, out of work, unemployed, and not in the labor force. So a little explanation here. Well, this is 2019, 2020. If you're unemployed, so that's in blue here, if you're not looking for a job, you're considered not in the labor force. So if the BLS calls you up and says, are you looking for work? Do you have a job? No. Are you looking for work? Excuse me. Do you have a job? No. Are you looking for work? Yes. Then that means you're unemployed. Do you have a job? No. Are you looking for work? No. Then that means you're not in the labor force. So you're not even counted anywhere if you're not looking for a job. And that's, those people are really unattached to the labor force. So it's like they've given up looking. And for what reason have they given up? You can see this went from 13% to 19%. So more than nearly 40,000 people who have just given up. They're out of the labor force. And what is the reason for that? So we have a survey here from BLS that asked that question. In 2019 in blue again, and green is 2020. Are they out of the labor force because are they not participating because they're ill? And 1% both years. That kind of was surprising given COVID. But we think that the people that are staying out of the workforce because of something else, because of the pandemic, probably listed themselves here. So it went from 5 to 11%. So that's up significantly the number of people that are not working, probably because of the pandemic. Then on the other hand, another bad trend that we've been seeing throughout this whole presentation is that the number in school, or the percentage in school, has dropped. So 81% back in 2019 said, I'm not participating in the labor force because I'm in school, and only 75% said that in 2020. And then this one surprised me just a bit too. Those that are staying at home to take care of family, and that increased just by 1 percentage point between 2019 and 2020. So now we'll look at some of the community level numbers, and here you see that in just about all of the boroughs, we're looking at 23 to 25% out of school, out of work. Bronx is the one that's the exception there, where it was up in the 37% area. And then here, some of the data for the 18 to 24-year-olds, looking at the top 5, looking at the 5 boroughs between 2013 and 2015 and 2017 and 2019. You can see that Mott Haven was there at the top in both years, although the percent out of school, out of work did come down. 2 others that moved around a bit. I'm sorry, these are the neighborhoods, not just the boroughs, but the neighborhoods. You can see that Brownsville is 3rd in 2013 and is 5th in the 2017 through 2019 range. And then you could see that Soundview was 5th here at 29%, and then in the later time period, they were 3rd at 27%. So with that, we'll be getting more updated data into 2021 for this level of detail toward the end of this year. And that ends my presentation, and I would be happy to answer any questions if there are some.
Hi, thanks, Chris. Looking at the Q&A, the question I see there, I don't know if it's quite right for you. It's about workforce beginning to have strategic conversations with the housing sector because of remote working and the trend toward remote work requiring us to be serious about affordable housing crisis. I don't know if you want to speak to that at all, or we have some other questions that we had prepared also.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds like someone just making that statement that is true. And it's interesting that we have seen some people moving out of the city, but they've not moved out of New York City as the MSA. They've just moved out of the city more to the suburbs where they could have more space and perhaps housing is more affordable.
Okay, and so just going back to the young adult employment and the data that you were sharing, why is the unemployment rate decreasing for young adults? What do you think some of the key factors are?
Right. Some of the key factors are that the people who typically would take those jobs are not taking them. So they're either they're at risk. They don't want to go back into the labor force and work, close by someone because they could get the vaccine, so they're choosing to stay home right now. It could be that they have kids that are at home that are learning, and so they have to be, one of the spouses have to be there with them, so they couldn't take the job. So I would say mostly it's because of people not going back into the labor force, and that should get to be a bit better, I think, when we get back to September, when kids can be back at school, and when the unemployment insurance, the extra $300 from the federal government drops off.
And let me see if there's anything new in the Q&A. Okay, no, so I could stick with things that I'm thinking about. You had mentioned also, that young adults are taking jobs that some of the other folks might not feel comfortable coming back, health reasons, family care reasons, other things like that. Can you speak a little bit more to specifically what jobs? I think you said some in like restaurants and hospitality. What about some of the other sectors that you see coming back online?
Right. Restaurant, hospitality, we really didn't see much decline in finance and banking, so it wouldn't be in those areas. Accommodation, food services, arts and entertainment, all those areas. Construction has been unbelievably strong during this recession. Typically you see construction drop off, but we're seeing a huge rebound in construction with some people wanting to live outside of the region. So construction, apprenticeships, and then manufacturing is coming back more slowly just because of some of the supply chain issues that we see right now. Green type jobs are on the increase as well.
Okay, I see a new question here that's interesting about thinking about how we capture people that might not be being paid on the books. What does the picture look like in the gig economy, underground economy? How does that contribute to the overall picture? Are those folks captured in any of this data, or how are you including that in your analysis?
So the gig economy is captured, and those numbers are still fairly low in percentages. So I'm thinking of the Uber drivers and Lyft and some of the Airbnb. The underground, that's a good one, and I know we're not capturing that here. So if a student is, starts their own business during the summer and doesn't pay taxes on it, then that would not be captured here. I think many of us who cut grass in the summer never did incorporate as a business. So some of that for youth, I think, is typical, but In terms of bigger businesses that it's black market, we don't capture that.
Okay, and I had another question about the upcoming, schools are opening, they've been closed on and off in the past year, and unemployment subsidies are ending. What are you predicting come September?
Come September, we're looking for, well, now we've got this Delta variant. That's good. We don't know how much that is going to mess up things, but what I've been hearing the medical officials saying is that, we should be peaking in like 4 weeks or so. So that would be good news in terms of kids being able to get back to school in person. And people still have a lot of money in their pockets from the stimulus money. The relief act started with the CARES Act, and then the stimulus money from the last couple of rounds from Congress. And even what the banks were showing is that they see deposits are much higher than they typically are. So assuming no big issues related to Delta, we should see this economy soaring over the rest of the next year, including the year after that. So when I say that, in terms of GDP, that would be somewhere growth around 5, 4, 5, 6%. And typically, very good times are 2% GDP growth. So we're looking at triple the growth over the next year and a half. The employment will be different though, because it's dependent on social distancing. So those jobs, in fact, some finance and insurance, professional business services, they're already higher than pre-pandemic levels in terms of employment. But other areas where you can't social distance as much, we don't expect to see pre-pandemic levels of employment until the end of this year or early next year. That would be some of those that we're starting to see the fastest growth in right now: arts and entertainment and food services, accommodations.
And to that point, right, talking about food services and accommodations and often low-paying jobs, we have been reading a lot in lots of different sources about the workforce crisis and labor shortage. And I think you were speaking to that a little bit as, an opening for young adults and why more young adults might be employed. But we're also, just from our anecdotal experience and the agencies that we work with, we are hearing a lot about a challenge in placing people in jobs and getting people to accept some of these real entry-level, lower-paying jobs. Do you have any data that backs that up at all? And what do you predict might change?
Yeah, so certainly that participation rate's showing it. I mean, people are not accepting those lower-paying jobs. And so what we're seeing is that businesses are having to increase the wages. So that is good as well. So to attract people into the labor force, they're having to increase the wages to get them there. And again, this is anecdotal. We're seeing it to some degree in the numbers. The wages are going up, percent change from a year ago. But when that happens, when the restaurants, the hotels have to pay more to get to people to work those jobs that they don't want because they're not paying enough, then their prices have to go up. So that's the whole thing that we're all debating right now. Economists and the Federal Reserve is saying that inflation is transitory, it's temporary. So we go to the store, we pay more for gas, we pay more for food, and we see it. We all see it when we go out every week and buy our groceries. And so in some of those cases, yes, there's not enough supply and there's a lot of demand, so the prices go up. But in terms of wages, when you increase your wages and you're now hiring someone at $20 or $25 an hour to work at your restaurant, and you're not going to be able to turn around in 6 months and say, sorry, I'm going to cut your pay to 15. So that's going to stick. And so some of this inflation that the Fed is saying is temporary, I think is going to stick. And what we're going to end up seeing is we have to pay higher wages to get the workers we need, and then we're going to have to increase our prices of the services and goods.
Well, the final thing, I guess I'm just kind of hearing a little bit of a through line based on our earlier conversations. I don't know if you were here for the conversations around some of the new initiatives that have corporate partners leading diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. And it just sounds like, based on what you're saying, maybe this is a real moment in time where that conversation is flipping, right? There's a talent shortage. There's a recognition of injustice in the workforce and an imbalance in earnings and equity and economic mobility. Would you say, based on you looking at this every day and me not, are things pointing in that positive direction, that this is a moment?
Yes, that's a great point, Carrie, and I would agree that this is a moment in time where we're going to see more of that. And it's interesting, as we work with expanding firms and site selectors, and typically the big question is, do you have the labor? If I move to your area, will I find the skilled workers I need? And now, and in some cases, they make this the first question. What are you doing to make sure that you have the diversity in your schools, so that we could hire those diverse people when we move to your region? What are you doing to make sure that those people who are out of school by ethnicity, look at the data that we saw here for New York, those that are overrepresented in the out of school, what are you doing to make sure that that ethnic group is getting into school? For two reasons: because they want to have a diverse workforce, and they also want to make sure they can find the workers. So if there are people not working, not participating, and not going to school, then let's find them a path forward, which is the great work that you guys all do. So I congratulate you on that.
Well, thank you, Christine. Thank you for putting, numbers and data that help us support to design new solutions to get more people into the economic life of the city, what we do. So I thank you so much for being here today and sharing your wisdom, and look forward to our continued collaboration.
Thank you, Carrie.
All right, I would like to now pass the mic back to my colleague, Stephanie Garcia, who will be wrapping up the day.
Thanks so much, Carrie. And thank you, Dr. Chmura, for that amazing presentation. All right, so we are coming to the end of our convening, guys, and I am so happy to speak to you all again. As a reminder, my name is Stephanie Garcia, Manager of Partnership and Community Engagement here at Jobs First NYC. We covered so much in the past few hours. Our objective of adapting to the future of work, surviving to thriving, was to inspire participants to have meaningful conversations and share effective solutions about how to have better pathways to prepare young people, the communities where they live, and the institutions that serve them to successfully navigate the evolving economy. We hope that this objective resonated with you all throughout the day, as you heard from all of our guest speakers. As you also probably heard, our focus areas for this year's convening included diversity, equity, inclusion, especially when it comes to the workplace, the use of technology in workforce development, and the impact of the pandemic on young adults in New York City. To review some of what we heard today, I'll start from the top and refresh everyone. So in the keynote conversation with Junius Williams and Allison Omens, Junius Williams Jr. reminded us that discrimination is still a fundamental problem of the recruitment and hiring process, and that to successfully make structural improvements and increase economic mobility for all people, we need to focus on changing the systems holding people in place. Afterwards, in the Reimagining a Diverse, Equitable, and Inclusive Workforce panel, Dr. Gail Mello gave us this takeaway. The future of work must be designed with the employees in mind and their shifting priorities coming out of the pandemic. Corporations, their CEOs are inherently competitive. These initiatives are a catalyst for competition around diverse hiring, fostering a shift from credential-based hiring to skills-based hiring, and around internal training to create a culture that is welcoming to all people. Highlighting the corporations and these initiatives that are coming out will help to influence other corporations to follow. From all panelists, we really got this great takeaway to be more effective in DEI initiatives and in any initiative that we're trying to put together by doing several things: measuring what you have accomplished and publicizing your impact, as well as making sure that leadership is fully bought in and committed to reimagining what isn't working, resourcing at the level needed for change, and long-term successes and sustainability. Let's not forget that Maurice Jones urged us to work towards building a more skills-based approach as well to the future of work, so that we as a nation can build a more perfect union. Lastly, Kelly also reminded us that transformational change is hard, but collaborative partnership spaces are springing up in order to create better impact. As you heard from our Vice President, Roman Jackson, Jobs First NYC will be publishing an agenda for young adult workforce development in New York City imminently. In that agenda, we outline 6 recommendations the city should adopt based on feedback from a diverse coalition of stakeholders to connect young adults to economic and educational opportunities. To enact these recommendations, Jobs First NYC calls for an increased investment of $770 million annually to support sectoral training, bridge programs, and subsidized employment, expanded high school career development opportunities, preventative mental health services, and a range of capacity building and system strengthening projects. Please look out for our publication in early September. Moving on to the topic of Tequity, our panelists enlightened us on their visions for tech in the workforce development and nonprofit sectors. Barani encouraged us to be optimistic about the policy and advocacy agendas to make tech platforms and data more accessible. Ryan highlighted the opportunity that intermediaries have in playing a key role to bring about and build more apprenticeships that will help employers identify young and deserving talent. And Sean shared a personal story to indicate how tech and data will help all of us establish pathways for any young adult, despite their disabilities, socioeconomic barriers, or dispositions. Last but not least, Carrie Fallhaber and Dr. Christine Chmura drove us home with their discussion on the data showing the pandemic's impact on 18 to 24-year-olds in New York City. You will get to see a brief on this data in the coming days as we look forward to publishing it. Okay, so we are now at the final stretch of our Adapting to the Future of Work convening. Before we go, I would like to point everyone to our feedback survey link in the chat. It will be available in the chat and will also pop up at the end of this webinar. This feedback survey is so important for us to hear from you all and to continue to improve our events. It should only take a few minutes to complete, and we really value your feedback, so thank you. So what happens from here? We hope to see you at future Jobs First NYC convenings, and we would love to partner with you. Please follow us on all social media channels. Following this convening as well, we will be sending a follow-up email so that you can all stay up to date with our upcoming papers and other activities, as well as any questions that you may still have regarding the day and any of our speakers. We hope that you will stay in touch, and thank you once again for joining us today. Enjoy the rest of your day, guys. Thank you.